In this lesson, we're going to be working on layering heavy electric guitars for that nice thick wall of sound. And we're going to be in drop D tuning. We're going to be utilizing bias effects. Real simple setup. You can see a model of a PV amp and a model of a DS1 distortion pedal. And we're going to be using a telly. Yes, a telly. Gear's important, and humbucking guitars are great and will work great for this. But tellies have a really throaty and diverse sound. They're able to be used in heavy guitars. Let's take a listen to our track. Here's our A section. Driving, lots of movement. Drop D on the bass. And here's our B section. Here's where we build to. So we're going to open up the guitars on the B section, and we're going to utilize palm muting on the A section. Starting with the A section in the first track, I'm simply going to double what the bass is doing on the electric with power chords. We'll go over the tone here in a minute, but here's what I'm going to be playing. And it's important with this type of playing, with this heavy gain, we minimize that. That's going to happen every once in a while. But as you are fingering this, try to be stealthy in your movements. Don't do this. That's going to give you a lot more sliding than using multiple fingers. And let's take a look at our tone setup for our first track. As you saw earlier, we've got a PV model, and I've got it mid-scooped, and I've got a little bit of bass up on the amp, and I'm actually not using that much gain. I am using a lot of presence. The reason I'm not using a lot of gain is because I've also got this DS1 model in front. Without that, sounds like this. With so that distortion pedal is actually giving us most of our presence and most of that mid-scoop sound. It's a simple patch. I don't have anything else going on except for this amp and this distortion pedal. And what about the use of a gate or some noise reduction? Shouldn't I be using some of that? I don't think so. When we've got a constant line like this, where that noise doesn't have a chance to peek in, then having a gate will change the feel of the attack a little bit, even if you have it set right, I think. And using noise reduction will change the sheen of the overall tone. So even on heavy guitars, I shy away from using noise reduction or gates. Instead, what I'll do is I'll go through and actually delete parts of the region if I need to get rid of some of that noise after the fact. But these parts don't even call for that. So skip the gate, skip the noise reduction, let the guitar be the guitar in all of its glory. Now, as we listen back to this, we're going to notice I'm intentionally playing, I'm dragging the beat. I'm letting my guitar be a little bit behind and letting the bass and the drums pull ahead in the beat. This is important when we start layering guitars. Pocket is important even from the very first track, because as you start to layer, if you don't have that in mind, you're going to notice your wall that you've created is not sitting right. It's pushing the band too much, or it's floppy. So many people, when they start to layer guitars, feel like stuff is too floppy. Most of the time that's because there's subtle pushings or subtle rushing of the beat, even on heavy stuff, and they don't hear it as that. They just hear it as floppy. They don't know what it is. That's it. Lay back in the beat, especially when you start to layer. Now, as I move into doubling this part, I'm going to take note of where my squeak is. And by squeak, I mean where that fret squeak was happening from my position shift. I'm going to purposely change it up so that I squeak in a different place. So my squeak is here instead of from here to here this time. That's going to help that squeak be not too accentuated when you hear them together, and it's going to be like it almost wasn't there. Let's double it, see what happens. Now for these doubles, I intentionally kept the rig the same, my pickup pattern the same, and my performance more or less the same. Although I did vary the way I was changing positions so that I didn't have the same squeakiness transition in the same place. And I made sure on that second track and had an extra measure of drag in my mentality. What that did is it helped the doubles not sound quite so. If I'm dragging even more on one of them, then there's this extra sense of separation. Again, both I was thinking behind the beat, and that's very important, but the second track I was thinking even more behind the beat. And that really does come into play when you listen to how the pocket ends up sounding. Now I also played through the downbeat of the B section here, which I'm actually going to remove. And you can see I'm actually right on or maybe a little bit behind the beat, which is what I wanted. I'm going to edit right out to the actual beat. And then we will figure that out when we go to the B section. Here is our A section doubles for review. And as we're listening, keep in mind some of the things that were discussed. I actually rushed a little bit there on this track, and I could replay that. Instead, I'm going to nudge it just a little bit behind the beat. I think I started off the whole thing a bit in a hurry, and I got into the pocket later. So rather than punch that, because it is a small section, that sounds much better. And I'm right on, I think, the rest of the time. You can really hear those different transitions. It widens the sound of the guitar, and it makes sure that no one element comes out too much. That's key. Vary your playing just enough. We'll see more of that here in the B section. Okay, so for the B section, I have got the same rig starting with the same rig. You can see here. And I should mention now that on all of these guitars, on all the guitars that we're going to be recording, I have got a high-pass filter set right around 80 hertz. And it's a relatively steep slope. 80 hertz-ish, 82 hertz actually, is the sound of your low E string on the guitar. Now we're in drop D, but because of the slope I have here, I'm not actually cutting off the value of the note. The reason I have these in place on all the guitars is to make room for the bass. The bass is perfectly capable of covering this area, and it does. If my guitars, in effort to make them heavy, end up having too much low frequency in there, then they end up muddying the whole mix and walking on the bass. And then when you try to make your mix nice and punchy and loud, you realize you have so much low end, your mix actually starts to shrink. So even from the very beginning stages of layering your mix and layering your guitars, put this high-pass filter on all of your guitars, right around 80 hertz. There doesn't need to be anything there. And you know, if I solo this, there's not a lot of low end, but then when you have the whole thing with the drums and the bass, it actually makes it beefier sounding. So we are going to apply that to our B section as well. Now here we're going to open up the guitars, and the chord progression is slightly different. So here's what we got going on. And here's what we're going to play. Now I used all downstrokes, and I was a little bit more strummy, a little bit less riffy. On the first part, I was very riffy, very particular about when I was striking the strings. Not as much here. As we open up, and as we don't use palm muting and get bigger, the fact that we are a little looser with our rhythm is actually going to work to our advantage as long as we double it correctly. So I want to be the same kind of loose on the next track. Again, same rig on both of these tracks, but this next double, I want to make sure that I nail the key parts of the riff for added tension. So that part where I go up to the 10th fret, that part is key. I need to nail that with the same emphasis that I had on the first track. Same with going back down to that D. That's got to be nailed. Right there. And here's the section that needs to be right. The rest of the strumming I can be a little looser on. And that will actually widen our sound. So let's give it a try. Now you'll notice there I used regular strumming, down and up strokes, and I was a bit more free even than I was on the other one. That variance is going to help widen our sound and work with us in that very high gain environment that we've created. that because that's where the A section will come back in. Now here, I've left off with my A section, and these chords actually come in slightly before the downbeat. That's actually just fine. I want that. That will prevent a gap. Sounds like one part. Why didn't I just do these on one set of tracks? I probably could have, but my levels are maybe slightly different. It gives me more flexibility to work with those levels later in the mix. And this transition is why I didn't do them on one track. So I actually wanted this to hold over just a little bit and not worry about being too precise with a crossfade. I'll probably fade both of those. But this gives me more flexibility in terms of mix later on, and I can really see that transition having them on two separate tracks. And let's face it, we're not working on a 8-track tape recorder or anything either. Okay, now we want to add some definition to our B section. We had definition in our A section simply by nature of the part. It was tight, it was palm muted, it was subdued, it was behind the beat. In this section, we have the same high gain guitars, but we want something else to bring some depth to our mix. Should we double it another 2 times? Well, yes, but we should change things up in our rig, and we should change things up in the way we're playing. These are 5 chords here, so we have 1, 5, 1. Those are the only intervals we're using, and we're going to remain with that. But we're going to change up our rig, and we're going to add some higher 1s and 5s, and we're going to bring those in behind that chord progression, and it's really going to bring that section to life. This is a technique that most of the heavy recordings that you hear from 90s rock, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, they would do this, where they vary the playing, they vary the part, they vary the rig setup, and even their pickup patterns, and then play along with the same thing. Rather than just doubling the same part over and over and over again, you change subtle things here and there, and it creates a lot of life in the track. So let's do that. For this part, I've chosen a Marshall Plexi model, and we're mainly flat. I've scooped the mids that's not even a scoop. I've turned the mids just down a little bit, boosted the treble a little bit, mild amount of gain, but we're actually pretty clean. I don't even have an overdrive pedal. I just have a treble booster, and that gives me this sound. Much more round, much more mid-range heavy. And to add to that, I'm actually going to change the pickup pattern on my guitar to my neck pickup. It's less honky and more bellish. And I've also added just a touch of reverb. This reverb is barely there. You can see, I'm actually going to add just a little more there. But now this is mono because it is all the way over to my right side, and then we're going to double it again. But I've created just a little bit of space around that. And though it is a chamber reverb, I don't have the time set super long. My tone is neutral. Now let's talk about the playing. Instead of just doing this, I'm going to involve the higher notes. And with an emphasis on the higher notes. We've got those low notes covered. Then here, I want those high notes to be ringing through. It's basically the same part. I'm going to do down and up strokes, much like I'm strumming an acoustic guitar. We want the string definition in there. So let's play along with it. Now, I actually didn't feel like I was strumming enough, and I felt like I was pushing the beat a little bit there, which is going to make it feel a little floppy. But I want to feel like I'm playing an acoustic, be real constant. Like that. Let's try it again. Okay, let's double it. Same rig, though I need to remember, I'm gonna turn up my reverb again on this one just a little. I think I had on the other track. Okay, let's bring those in and see how our transition works and listen for how it rounds out the sound of the mix. That's obviously too much, but I want to hear the contrast right now. I am rushing the beat. Those need to be redone. The strumming is good. The rushing the beat is not. So let's do them again. Here we go. I also feel like in listening there, I want a bit more high definition. I don't want the bridge pickup high definition sound, but I want more presence. I could do that with the EQ, or I could go back to the amp. I always like working with the amp more if I can. So I'm just going to turn up the presence a little bit on each one of these. And then if we need to, we will tweak the other EQ in post. Of course, we can do this in post too because we're recording direct, which is great. Okay, so don't rush the beat. It ruins everything. Here we go. And again. That's nice and bellish. I like the bell back there. Pocket is much better. Let's bring these down a bit. Bring them out, actually. and gradually bring them back in till we have the proper amount of bell. I think that's it right there. You don't want it to be the prominent part. Let's listen through to a little bit of the A section and then hear that transition. I think that's too much bell. Relative to the bass and drums, these actually need to come up a bit. Heavies. Listening here, let's transition. So as you're layering, particularly doubling, like we were doing here, don't neglect any subtlety in the process. The subtle differences in how you play each double make a big difference. Your attentiveness to pocket while you're tracking the first all the way through the fourth matter a lot, as you saw. The differences in tone, pickup patterns, amp tweaks, pedal tweaks, as you seek to bring out different parts of the line within each part. The transitions from chord to chord, as we saw, make a big difference. All these things help for tight, intentional, and well-placed doubling. And it really comes out on these heavy guitars. We'll see different things come out as we work with different styles, and we look at doubling and layering other styles of rhythm guitar. We'll see you for more.